My name is Eliza and I'm a cognitive psychologist and an ADHD coach, and I work with high performers with ADHD.
Yeah, I'm Nate Page. I'm a licensed psychologist and a certified group psychotherapist. And I've been specializing more and more in ADHD after receiving an adult diagnosis myself. And so specializing in ADHD assessment, but I've also had a long career doing burnout work. So understanding burnout for myself, my own personal journey, but then doing a lot of work with mostly caregivers, therapists, nurses, doctors, to help them recover from burnout, and doing a lot of presentations, a lot of organizational consultation with burnout.
We're really excited to be able to bring the science and the research together with the experience of ADHD and burnout to help you guys better understand what burnout looks like for you. What we're going to jump into is what burnout is, what to look for, your own burnout experience, and what are some of the causes of burnout. And so let's jump right in.
So this first question, what even is burnout? And really, the best way I know how to describe it is that it is an injury, a very real injury. But the way it's actually talked about in a lot of research papers is it's an injury to your soul. The way that it's an injury may be different compared to other type of soul injuries is it's chronic. So it's when chronic stress creates an injury. And there's really three things that show up in the research when you know that it's burnout. And the first is that feeling of exhaustion. And it's not just exhaustion, because exhaustion by itself you can recover from. And maybe if you get a good night's sleep or you take a week vacation, you recover from that. But it's the type of chronic exhaustion that really takes its toll on your body and your soul and actually creates an injury. There's also the feelings of disconnection. Usually there's some sense of callousness, a sense of, oh, I need to protect myself. And so I have maybe less empathy, less care, less energy emotionally to really feel connected to whatever work it is that I'm doing. And then the third thing is there's this sense of inefficacy. So usually it starts with I believe that my performance is going down. I'm not getting all my work done. But usually pretty soon that actually starts to happen where I am performing less and less. And usually bosses or family members or other people start to notice that. But if you want to just have the one thing in your head to help you remember what burnout is it is an actual injury.
Many of you maybe are starting to resonate with that already, but I want us to really zero in on what it's like to be an individual with ADHD and experience burnout. So, what we know from the research is individuals with ADHD are actually more likely to experience burnout than are their neurotypical counterparts. So, what is it about being an ADHDer that puts us at a greater risk for developing burnout? And well, if you look at some of the ADHD symptoms, they can kind of look like burnout. When we look at our challenges with our executive functioning, and we can think of executive functioning as the suite of skills that allows us to keep in mind long term goals and move toward them, the challenges we have with that make it difficult for us to minimize the risk of burnout. Specifically, our challenges of time management, our challenges with organizing ourselves and organizing ourselves to time, as well as some problem solving, can get in our way and result in us being at a greater risk for developing this burnout. The other part of this too is there's kind of a stigma with burnout, but also with having ADHD. I have often heard individuals feeling very nervous about disclosing their ADHD to employers or their loved ones for fear of not being taken seriously or just it seeming like an excuse. And similarly, in the workplace, a lot of employees are nervous to mention they might be teetering on burnout because they don't want to be viewed as a complainer or that they're inept. So, this stigma around burnout, plus the stigma around having ADHD, may result in individuals with ADHD hiding their burnout. They're afraid of being seen as weak or flawed or inept. And so, this fear results in a lot of individuals with ADHD hiding their struggles, masking their symptoms, and then pushing themselves too hard often at the expense of their own well-being. And when you chronically do that, I'm sure you can imagine what that starts to feel like. You start to detach from your job. You start to feel less motivated. You're exhausted and you're drained. And then it also just feels like, wow, I can't even do these things. And so that feeling of being ineffective can come up to the surface for us.
This is where the rubber really meets the road when we're doing burnout recovery and burnout prevention work. A lot of people know that they're burned out, but they don't necessarily know why they're burned out or what is really causing that. And so there's a really good researcher, Dr. Maslach, that has identified 6 different causes, and usually in workplace settings, but also in family settings or other areas. So we want you to really be thinking about the ways that you were burned out and the reasons why you were burned out. And I'm just going to quickly highlight the 6 different causes before Eliza talks more about the ADHD side of things. The first one is what most people think of, it's work overload. So that I have too much on my plate, or maybe the intensity of it is too much. And so, of course, the solution to that would be trying to reduce the quantity or the intensity of the workload to get the stress down in that way. The next one is the lack of control, that I don't really have the ability to make the changes that I need to. So maybe the system or my boss or whatever it is that's going on for me, I don't have the ability to reduce the stress or make it more manageable. Another one is insufficient rewards. And that's not usually as much the salary or the other benefits, even though that matters. Mostly this is talking about that kind of intrinsic reward or that sense of recognition, that sense of feeling like, oh, I do really matter. And my contributions are really making a difference that people are noticing. Sense of community is a big one. And when there's a lack of that, I don't feel like I belong. I don't feel like I really fit in. That really increases the stress day to day. And that can be one of the main causes for burnout for a lot of people. The fifth one that's just noted a lot is the absence of fairness. That sense that, oh, when I put in work, that I receive the credit for that. And there's not too many things, at least in a workplace environment, but also in a family environment, that will create more kind of a toxic stress and can really, really cause burnout. And then the last one, which is a big one, is just how do my personal values line up with the values of the system that I'm in? So if it's a workplace, the ways that I value using my time and value engaging with people, and at least my life values, what gives me purpose and meaning, does that line up with what I'm required to do with my job? And that mismatch can create a lot of stress. Even if everything else is fine, the workload and the community and the fairness, if there's that mismatch with values, that will create a lot of friction, a lot of stress, and can pretty quickly lead to burnout. So there's a quick overview of the 6 causes. And Eliza is now going to delve a bit more into the ADHD side of these causes.
So let's go through each of those factors again and really tie them into the ADHD experience. So that first one was about workload. Well, with ADHD, as I talked about earlier, we do struggle with our time management as well as realistic expectations. And so because of our challenges in trying to manage our time and then manage our caseload of items, and then challenges with what can I actually do within a time period, we can often say yes to more things than we really can handle. And then that mountain of work just gets bigger and bigger. And so this sets us up to have potentially an unmanageable workload. So outside of the challenges with managing time, if we also look at challenges with task initiation, that can make it more difficult too to create a manageable workload. Because again, if some of these tasks aren't super exciting, or the mountain has gotten so big and you're just staring up at it and it feels like you just couldn't scale it, it's really hard for us to get started. And this also brings me to the other point of our challenges with emotional dysregulation. So when things get really big and scary, it's really hard for us to regulate how we're feeling and be able to show up for that task. Although we can sometimes experience negative emotions more intensely than neurotypical individuals, we also can experience positivity and optimism more intensely. And so these are wonderful strengths that we possess. However, we sometimes can take it too far. We get excited about potential projects or potential creative pursuits that we could take on. And so we will say yes to more than we can actually handle. And that contributes as well to that unmanageable workload. The flip side of this too, though, is with the emotion dysregulation, we may struggle to say no when we're asked to take on more because we don't want to let someone down. And we often can have a fear of rejection. And William Dotson talks about this as being rejection sensitivity dysphoria. So this is a real or perceived rejection or criticism that one experiences that can create intense emotional pain. So for us ADHDers, a lot of times we'll do anything to avoid that pain. And so we will say yes to many asks, and then those asks create that big mountain, and then our workload becomes unmanageable and it's hard to chip away at it. The next thing that Nate talked about was that lack of control. So in situations or work environments or home environments where it feels like you don't have a say or you don't have control over your work or your life, that really can result in putting someone at risk for burnout. So autonomy is something that's really important for all individuals, but it's especially important for individuals with ADHD. When we feel a restriction on our autonomy, it often undercuts our motivation, making it even more difficult to stay on top of one's workload or their tasks. Even if the workload is in theory manageable, if it feels like someone's always micromanaging you and you don't feel like you have a say, you don't feel in control at all, it's really hard to consistently show up for that. And I often joke with clients about us ADHDers having the don't tell me what to do complex. So when we feel like we're constantly being told what to do, whether it's from a boss or potentially our spouse or even ourselves, it's really, really hard to stay motivated and show up. And if that's a chronic experience, you can imagine, and I'm sure you already know this feeling of just not feeling up to the work and just feeling really detached, and you can't show up. You want to because you understand it's important to, but there is this disconnect between your internal self and your internal drives and what needs to happen in your work or in your personal life. Nate also touched upon this idea of insufficient rewards. While it is true that financial reward is important, it's not the end all be all. And in fact, personal recognition and appreciation is even more important than that. And this is particularly true for people with ADHD. ADHDers are extremely sensitive to feedback, and they actually greatly benefit and thrive with positive feedback. If you remember earlier when I talked about the workload and emotion dysregulation comes up here as well. If there is not positive feedback being given to us, and maybe we're often receiving more negative feedback, we're going to experience rejection sensitive dysphoria, and we're going to feel really dysregulated, which again makes it hard to show up. Have you ever received a negative piece of feedback or even just a slight critical piece of feedback, and then you feel like your whole day has gone out the window? Many of you maybe know this experience. Well, this is where this happens chronically. And I'm sure you can imagine how difficult it is to keep showing up for that when you're constantly being given negative feedback. So we really need to have positive feedback opportunities as individuals with ADHD, because the flip side of RSD, or rejection sensitive dysphoria, is something that Ned Hallowell, who is a psychiatrist who works with ADHDers, it's something he calls recognition responsive euphoria, or RRE. So when we have opportunities for positive feedback, we thrive. We are able to be super motivated. And so in the absence of that, we can really struggle to feel oriented to the job and feel connected to the job, as well as feeling underappreciated and or undervalued, which obviously can undermine our motivation to do the work that we need to do. And maybe you're already starting to see how these different causes may build up on each other and create more challenges that kind of get you really stuck or at risk for developing burnout. Nate also mentioned there's a breakdown of community or there's a lack of community. When you don't have people around you that you feel supported by, that you feel respected and understood by, that really can undercut motivation as well. And it's really important for people to have community and connection, but it's especially important for individuals with ADHD. And I'm going to quote Ned Hallowell again, but he often talks about the need for the actual nutrient vitamin C, but also the other vitamin C called connection. So when individuals with ADHD can feel connected with other people, they are able to more easily show up for the things that they need to do or the things that they want to do. And the other part of this too is that, and maybe some of you will resonate with this, is a lot of individuals with ADHD may feel othered throughout their life. So this constant feeling of being different, having that go through your life, and then it's showing up again in your workplace or even in home can be really, really uncomfortable and again, undercut motivation. The next one was the absence of fairness. So maybe some of you have heard about individuals with ADHD having justice sensitivity. So being very sensitive to social issues, injustices against individuals or minorities. And so this can be the case too within the work environment. So if it is perceived that there's an absence of fairness amongst colleagues, amongst themselves, this can also contribute to that burnout experience. And it also has to do with our challenges with emotional dysregulation. This is one of the reasons why we tend to be very sensitive to justice issues, because we can feel things more intensely, more deeply. And then again, with that experience of often feeling othered or unsupported, we get what that's like. And so we feel that again more deeply and more intensely. Then lastly, we have conflicts with personal values. So this is similar to the need for autonomy for us ADHDers. We really need to feel connected to the work, to our job, to our lives. Individuals with ADHD have an interest-based nervous system. And so if there's a lack of connection in one's job, in one's life, with their own interests and their own passions and their personal values, it is really difficult to stay connected and to stay motivated in that job or in whatever situation that you're in. Individuals with ADHD are not the kind of people that can show up for something that they don't feel connected to. It is extremely difficult. And if you chronically have to do that, it chips away at you. One of my favorite things that Ned Hallowell talks about is the need for a creative outlet. And I like to think of that more deeply too as just feeling connected to something. And in the absence of having that, a creative outlet or being connected to your values or connected to your passions, it can really set you up to not feel great. And Dr. Hallowell often talks about his own experience of when he's not able to be writing a book, which is his creative outlet, he often feels depressed. So again, if you're chronically in this position where you're in conflict with your personal values and you're having to shove those personal values aside, it chips away at your soul. Hence why Nate talked about burnout being literally an injury of your soul.
So as we've gone through these 6 different causes, hopefully things are lighting up for you. You're recognizing on a deeper level, oh, this is where my burnout has been caused in this category, these multiple categories. And this is the type of work that can be really good to do with maybe a coach or a therapist or family members or other people that you trust. And a little tip or I guess hack for you, if you can start complaining or venting or getting frustrated and do that in a safe environment, perhaps, with a coach, and the more you go with that, usually that really brings clarity to these things like, oh, and it really frustrates me, and oh, like this too, and you start to, I think, recognize more and more these are the mismatches. This is where the stress is. This is what's hurting me. And so that can be a very, very valuable thing to do. And hopefully with this video, you're doing that on your own. But if you need more help, yeah, come to the coaching hours or find a good mentor or someone that can really help you unpack this, because this is what needs to be done in order to change burnout. You have to accurately understand what are the causes. It is really helpful to then have the converse of, well, what can I do to move more towards the 6 positive conditions in the environment so that not only recover from burnout and prevent burnout, but move towards that thriving, that vivaciousness. And so what Eliza did is just do the inverse of the 6 different causes. So instead of workplace overload, to have the manageable workload, to increase your autonomy and control, to have meaningful recognition and rewards, like she was talking about, that recognition, response, euphoria. And yeah, to do whatever you can to create supportive community and relationships in your work and other spaces, and to have the fair and respect, and have the social justice norms. And then, of course, really working to create a context, create a job, a workplace environment that lines up with your values. And the more that people are able to do this, the more that there is that passion, that thriving, and oftentimes the excitement to go to work, and whatever stress comes, it doesn't create the burnout. I'm able to have the resources and really meet that and grow stronger and stronger each day in my work, as opposed to getting injured more and more.
Thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you were able to take away some meaningful insights or meaningful information. So I will say, sign off and say goodbye and thank you, and I'll pass it over to Nate.
Ditto. May all your burnout recovery dreams come true.
Thank you so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed the content and want more, be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell. That way, you'll never miss out on the latest updates from Neural Revolution. I greatly value your input, whether you're an individual with ADHD seeking information or guidance on a specific topic, or if you're a practitioner looking for clinical insights to better support your ADHD clients. Please share your suggestions in the comments below. Until next time, take care and get your dopamine on.